Welcome to the video version of The Tinkerer's Guide to the 18650 by me. It's an article I wrote that basically details everything I know about the salvaging, testing, and using of lithium-ion 18650 cells. Arduino vs. Evil asked me to make this for a zine that he's doing. I don't know much about the zine itself, but it sounds pretty cool. Can't wait to get it printed. I spent about 2 weeks making this, and probably enough time to make like 10 YouTube videos, so I'd like to get at least one video out of it. Plus, I like to just share it, because I feel like this could help some people. I feel really happy about it. Also, when I get this video done, I can put a QR code link to this video in the final page or the final edition of this that'll be printed. Now that could be pretty cool. So let's start reading The Tinkerer's Guide to the 18650 version 1.2. This is actually a little bit outdated because this is a copy that my friend read for me, a very smart friend who I used to work with at Apple. And he had a few things to say. We talked for like an hour about this. And a lot of those changes went into version 1.3, but it's mostly the same thing. Since 1998, the lithium-ion battery has dominated the world of energy storage. It replaced the weaker technologies such as nickel-cadmium and nickel-metal hydride due to its reliability and higher operating voltage. This higher voltage allows the lithium-ion cell to hold more watt-hours in the same space. The 18650 is the most prevalent lithium-ion cell, so it is a good start for many DIY projects. So here's the lithium-ion 18650 cell. Basically, it's just a form factor, a size of a lithium cell that is very heavily used in portable electronics and laptops and whatnot. So they're pretty easy to come by, and they're also really wonderful for little projects and experimentation. They can hold a lot of power, especially compared to older cells. Well, 18650 cells can have a capacity ranging from 4 watt-hours to 12 watt-hours. They're fully charged at 4.2 volts and fully discharged at 3.6 volts, although some people will go down to 3.5 or something, and it's kind of up to you. Their chemistry has diversified and evolved over the decades, leading to cells that specialize in capacity, power, and longevity. You can find this whenever there's like RC batteries that have high current they can supply and whatnot. So those are specialized for providing a lot of power for like remote controlled aircraft and whatnot. There has also been a steady increase in the capacity of 18650s over time. Most of these operate at the same voltage and won't be catastrophic if mixed. However, LiFePO4 cells, lithium iron phosphate cells, operate at a lower voltage and cannot be mixed with other types. There are some specialized cells that can operate at 4.35 volts. Actually, I think I might have some. Let's see. Last time I checked, that was the ICR 18650 26As. Basically, there are some cells that can handle 4.35 volts, from what I know, and I think this is one of them. Inside an 18650 is a tightly wound coil of plates. This configuration is called a Swiss roll. The roll is housed within a durable metal cylinder that greatly increases durability. At the end is a cap that allows the cell's electrolyte to vent. Some well-designed 18650 caps can act as a fuse in case of failure. Although, some of the cheaper ones, they don't act as a fuse, so it's always good to add a fuse to it. 19670 or protected 18650 cells have a small monitoring circuit at one end that makes the cell more foolproof. However, these cells aren't common. To be honest, I've never found a single protected lithium cell. I always find the unprotected ones, so I don't really know much about those. How to test lithium-ion 18650 cells. You must test the 18650 before you use it due to the risk of failure and even deflagration. Here is a method I have developed over several years of experimentation. About 5 years, actually. I find the IMAX B6 does a good job with charging and discharging. Some knockoff IMAX units can have a programming issue that makes the lithium discharge setting not work properly. Try the NiCad discharge setting if you experience this. I set the NiCad cutoff voltage to 3.0 volts to take into account the voltage drop. This almost always results in the cell settling at 3.6 volts. IMAX B6, about 20 bucks. This one happens to be a knockoff one, but it works good enough. So I just discharge with the nickel-cadmium setting. And I got myself one of these little cell holders. So let's say we have a fully charged cell. I can just pop that in there. Oh. Holy fuck, I just realized I forgot like an entire page of content. Fuck. God damn it. So basically it was just a segment talking about where to get lithium-ion 18650 cells. So there's 3 main sources. first is laptop battery packs. That's where I've gotten all my 18650 cells from, and it's basically the best way to go because laptop batteries have some pretty nice cells in them most of the time, especially if they have brand names on them. Like this actually has the Hewlett-Packard logo on it, so that's probably going to mean that there's going to be some pretty good cells in here. Man, now I feel so unprepared for not having this in the article. I feel really bad about that. Well, any future version of it will definitely have that in it. Basically, you gotta wrestle these things out of the battery packs, and some packs are easier than others. This one's a big pain in the rump. So the other options are power tool batteries, which are usually just killed. They're overused. Whereas these, the batteries, outlast the computers. However, the third one is buying individual cells from eBay or Amazon or something like that. And unfortunately, you are most likely going to get ripped off by that because there are a lot of companies that buy old laptop battery packs in China, used ones, rip the cells open, rip the covers off, put their own covers on them without testing them, and sell them as 5,000 milliamp hours whenever 5,000 milliamp hour cells don't even exist. They are impossible with today's technology. And yeah, so there's just a lot of ripoffs. I wouldn't buy Trustfire, TrueFire, or UltraFire cells, that's for sure. And I would just go this route, unless you need very special cells, but you're gonna pay a lot of money. If you go this route, you're gonna be paying, maybe sometimes even getting them for free. I can usually get these for about 25 cents a cell doing this, if you make really good friends at a computer shop. But if you buy individual cells, that can be like $12 a cell, so that's just craziness. So unless you need a very special cell, I say go with the laptop battery pack. So you gotta make sure that these don't actually touch, otherwise they're gonna arc over and catch your house on fire. And I'm doing a really bad job. One thing to keep in mind is that these little strips are actually made of nickel, so you can use any pair of scissors and it's probably not gonna dull them that much. Whereas if they're made of steel, then they'll probably dull them. Sometimes cleaning off all this junk on the cells can be a little infuriating though. Okay, so step 1. Start here. Remove all tabs connecting the cells together so you have individual 18650 cells. Okie dokie. There we go. Good enough for me. Okay, so now I'm just gonna test the voltage on this. Oh yeah, I guess that would be the second piece of it. Well then, so we have an individual 18650 cell. Measure the cell voltage. Is it above 1 volt? Yes, but it's not above 2 volts, so I'm not going to trust that cell in much. I'm having a hard time finding cells that are above 2 volts. 3.75 volts. There we go. Okay, so remove all the tabs connecting the cells together so you have individual 18650 cells. Done. Measure the cell voltage. Is it above 1 volt? Yes. Is it above 2 volts? Yes. Charge cell with 2 amps. Does it get very hot? This will take a little while, so we're going to charge it on the lithium setting with 2 amps. And I'll probably come back in about 30 minutes and see if it's like abnormally hot. That's pretty much up to you, but usually I do like if it's uncomfortably warm. Then I take that as a hint to not use that cell. So the next step is let the cell sit for a while. Does this voltage drop significantly? So that's what I actually do over here. So I charge up my cells whenever I'm testing a bunch of them on here. Then whenever they hit 4.2 volts, I set them over here. Then before I test them, I check to make sure they haven't dropped in voltage, because some bad cells will drop in voltage a lot, like a crazy amount. If it drops in voltage like 0.02 volts, I'm usually fine with that. But it's a good idea to let them sit from an hour to a week or however long you want. But usually I let them sit at least overnight, and then make sure that they don't drop in voltage a lot, because some cells can really give you trouble if they do drop in voltage. Then you discharge at 1 amp down to 3.6 volts with IMAX B6, right discharge capacity on its side. This cell is already at 4.19 volts, so that's pretty close. I'm going to stop this and we'll jump forward, kind of like in one of those cooking shows. So this IMAX B6 is a knockoff charger, so the lithium the lithium setting is totally broken on this. I go to the nickel cadmium discharged by 1 amp down to 3 volts. So basically what it's going to do is, on this cell, it is going to consistently pull 1 amp from it until it reaches 3.0 volts on this side, and then it'll totally let go and it'll stop the test. The issue with this, though, is that whenever you test on the lithium-ion setting, it just takes it down to 3 volts, and it just doesn't stop, and it just takes it down to 0 volts. So there's no end to the test aside from ruining your cell. And then even whenever it gets down to 0, there's some issue where it still counts up. So it's totally broken. So I use the nickel cadmium setting on these cheap ones that I get. But the nickel cadmium setting works good enough. So I'll probably come back to this in about an hour, and we can see how many milliamp hours of capacity was in it. So it ran for about 2 hours, and it got almost 2 amp hours. That about adds up. So the number is 1,990 milliamp hours of capacity. So I write it on the side, so later on I can organize it better. Yeah, it went down to about 3.5 volts, but I guess these cells just have a lower internal resistance, which is good. Oh well. Discharge at 1 amp down to 3.6 volts with IMAX V6. Right discharge capacity on its side. Is the capacity above 1,000 milliamp hours? Yes, it is. It's 1990. Use this cell as you see fit, including larger battery packs. So I kind of separate cells. Like let's imagine this cell is under 1 amp hour, under 1,000 milliamp hour. Then I'll set this aside for smaller little experiments like little flashlights and whatnot. But I'll only use cells that have more than 1,000 milliamp hours in them for like my electric bicycle battery pack or something big, because I don't trust the lower capacity ones because they've obviously degraded a lot, so they probably have a higher chance of causing issues, and I'd rather not have those cells cause issues in a very large battery pack with a lot of energy to go boom. On to page 3. So the cells found between 2 volts and 4.2 volts have the least amount of internal damage. That's why I don't exactly want to use these ones since they're found at like 1.98 volts or something like that. I'll just reserve these for smaller experiments, things that don't matter as much, like little flashlights or maybe something small. But I don't know if I'll trust these in a battery pack like my electric bicycle or something like that. Building a battery. So now we want to run a device off 18650s. You need to know what voltage range it needs and how many amps it will pull. I recommend having at least 1 amp hour of capacity for every 1 amp you plan to pull. This will ensure your cells are stressed less, will last longer, and won't heat up as much. You can make the battery pack to directly run the device, or use a step-up boost converter to reach the required voltage. So here's my 48 volt e-bike battery, which is kind of signified by that, although this has a lot more cells. This is just simplified. And here's a lantern that can demonstrate the other method for powering something. So with this one, I just took a bunch of 18650 cells, connected them all in parallel, so they're like a 4.2 volt 20 amp hour battery. That way I can just charge it with a USB, because they sell these little circuit boards that I can fit inside of there that you can charge via USB. I found out that would take too long, so I haven't done that yet. But I can still do that, so the battery part is still really easy. You don't need to balance charge it, because whenever you have a lot of batteries, the cells in series can lose, they can drift from each other, to where like imagine this looks like 8 volts here, but this might be 6 volts and this might be 2 volts. And if this one gets to 6 volts, that might have an issue of blowing up, because yeah, it's just like if you only measure from the ends, you don't know for sure if these are all staying at the correct voltage. So for this one, what I do is I use little step-up transformer circuits, little boost converters that you get off eBay, and I just use those to take in the 4.2 volts and step it up to 28 volts for the front LED, and then 12 volts for the top LED. And it actually works really well. Unfortunately, though, it's not nearly as efficient. So for the electric bicycle, I have to make the battery fit the voltage that I need. So I don't have to convert the power or anything. So with this battery pack, basically I just hooked enough cells in series till I got the voltage I needed. So I'm not passing the power through any circuit to step it up or anything. And so that means that this has a lot more power it can give. But unfortunately that means that I need to have a BMS circuit to balance charge the cells to make sure they don't drift, and like some might get undercharged and some might get overcharged. Thankfully you only have to balance the series cells, or the series packs. Cells in parallel automatically balance against each other, so you can just, if cells are in parallel, you can just imagine them as just one bigger battery. You don't have to balance them against each other, you just have to balance them against the pack that's in series with them. I fear I might be repeating myself a bit, but who knows. I built my e-bike battery to directly output the correct voltage my e-bike motor controller required. Yeah, I'm repeating myself then. Oh well. For my high-powered LED lantern upgrade, I instead put all my cells in parallel to give 4.2 volts. I then use a step-up boost circuit from eBay to turn that 4.2 volts into 28 volts to run the LED. Using the boost converter to step up the voltage helped make the charging simpler and allowed for finer voltage control. Oh yeah, I forgot about that, because on the step-up circuit is a little potentiometer you can adjust to get a more fine voltage. With these, you get a voltage increment of 4.2 volts. Step-up circuits waste energy, are a possible failure point, and can't handle much power, so they aren't useful for when projects use more than a few watts. Once you know the voltage and capacity requirements, you can decide how many parallel and series cells you need in your pack. Remember that connecting cells in parallel adds the capacity, and series adds the voltage. So basically what I do is, I think, okay, my electric bicycle, it needs about 48 volts. So I would need like 12 cells in series. Now I went with 13 cells in series because 13 cells gives a little bit more power. And it's closer to the voltage range that the lead-acid battery packs give. Because most electric bicycle kits are actually designed for lead-acid batteries. Plus, I had a hard time finding cheap BMS circuits for 12 series packs. I always found them for 13 series, so I just decided I'll make one more pack, upgrade my battery pack to 13 series, and then use a 13 series BMS. But if I would have found a 12 series BMS, I probably would have used that too. But then for the current that I needed to give to the motor to get the bike to run properly, it was about 10 amps of power. So at the very least, you would want to have a pack with 5 cells in parallel. So right now, no, it's 20 amps. Okay, so you need 10 cells in parallel. That makes more sense. So you need to have 10 cells in parallel to give that much current. So it's better to get more than that, but don't go below that. Don't stress the cells too much, because otherwise they won't last nearly as long. I actually don't use this rule because I go for having 2 amp hours of capacity for every amp I want to pull. That way the cells don't even heat up, really. And you don't have to worry about cooling then. I think that building the battery bigger than the power it needs to convey, so it doesn't warm up, I think that's a really good way to go. I kind of feel that if a battery starts warming up on you, you're doing something wrong. So here's just some examples of like 4 series 5 parallel, 2 series 3 parallel, 1 series 10 parallel battery pack configurations. Here are some examples of how, oh man, I really am repeating myself. I should just shut up and read what I wrote. Here are examples of how cells could be configured. Be sure to make sure every parallel pack of cells has a similar capacity. It is common to describe the series and parallel configuration in a pack by the blank S blank P. For example, my e-bike battery I use is 13 series 12 parallel, and my laptop has a 3 series 2 parallel configuration. On to page 4. Balance charging and BMS circuits. So that's when we're actually getting into these little circuits right here. So, if you have cells in series, you need to keep them balanced. Lithium-ion cells have no inherent mechanism to inhibit overcharging, so the cells can drift in voltage from each other over time. Yeah, because like the thing is, if you give power to a lead-acid battery, the lead-acid battery kind of stops around like 14 volts or so, and then after that point it starts burning it off as heat, and if you take the charge off, it settles back down to like 13.1 volts. But with this, you have the issue that if you feed it with power, it'll take all the power you give it until it gets up to like a high enough voltage where it'll inevitably fail. And that failure can be deflagration or popping all of its innards out and with fire and whatnot. And it's not good. But thankfully, it's not too difficult to safeguard from that. You just gotta don't overcharge it and you're good enough. You can monitor each series pack manually or use a BMS, a battery management system, to maintain the cells. So the first battery pack I had, I didn't have a BMS, so I did it manually. Basically, I checked every single cell, and if one was dropping down too low, I would charge it up so it matched all the other cells equally. And that worked okay, but it just took too long to manually balance it. If cells become imbalanced, they run a risk of overcharging and undercharging. Both lead to failure and possible fire. Cells mostly drift from each other over many charge-discharge cycles because every cell, especially used cells, have different self-discharge rates, and some are less efficient when converting their chemical energy into electricity, resulting in waste heat. A BMS circuit can easily be obtained from the internet for a reasonable price. Be sure to get a BMS with the correct series configuration for your battery pack. I originally built my e-bike battery to be 12 series configuration, but had to retrofit it to 13 series when I had trouble finding a 12 series BMS. Be sure the BMS you get is also for lithium-ion or LiPo batteries. LiPo-4 BMS circuits won't be compatible with the higher voltage of an 18650. Oh, and just FYI, lithium-ion and lithium polymer are pretty much the same thing electrically. That's just a difference in the packaging of how they pack the physical plates of the cells. Because the thing is, even in these types of batteries, there's a bunch of different chemistries, but they usually, like lithium-ion and lithium polymer usually are the same electrically. Like you can still expect them to be charged to 4.2 volts and discharged at 3.6 volts. And so a lot of the safeguards for not catching them on fire work across all of them, except for LiPo-4 cells. Those ones work an entire volt lower, but that's like the one odd one out. Although I don't think I've ever seen a LiPo-4 cell in an 18650 package, so don't worry about that too much. Here's a picture of a BMS, which actually matches this one. I wasn't even thinking about that it would match this. So we have the little circuit with a connector for 4 going off. It's actually just like this. So one goes to the negative, one goes to 4.2 volts, one goes to 8.4 volts, and one goes to 12.6 volts. And of course, if you have more on there, it goes more. Like for instance, for my 13 series e-bike battery, it actually has 14 wires on there going from 0 volts to like what, 52 volts or whatever it is. And that's just so it can see what each series pack voltage is, and that way it can know not to overcharge it. Plus, I think inside of here is some circuit to allow it to focus on like the middle cell and slowly feed it a few milliamps just to bring it back up. So that's pretty nice. So with this one, you have B minus, P minus, and C minus shown on here. P minus is where the power negative goes in, C minus is where the charge negative goes in, and B minus is where it goes to the battery. Here's what a 3 series, man, I am repeating myself. Here's what a 3 series BMS would look like when connected up. Notice how the balance leads have one more wire than the series configuration of the pack. This is to allow the BMS to see all the parallel packs. Cells in parallel will naturally balance against each other, so you only have to balance the series cells. Structuring the cells. Along with electrically connecting the cells together, you must also physically connect them together. If the cells move in relation to each other, the connectors between them will become stressed and possibly fail sooner. And I'm talking about like actually keeping them mounted like that so they don't move. I built my first large battery packs by simply taping the cells together. This works surprisingly well. The tape has lasted years and thousands of miles. On a newer battery, I used a 3D printer to make a plastic frame to hold the cells. This has worked really well also. I believe there are other mounting methods available on the internet, but my homemade solutions have lasted more than I expected. And actually, since writing this, I have gotten a commercially made one, I think, from a subscriber. So this is actually what like companies sell. This is kind of interesting. It's like really easy to put together. Although I'm not a huge fan of one aspect of it. So I like using tape on my cells because then you can have them stick together like that instead of like that. So with that, I think you save a little bit more space, but I could be wrong. This is actually the first time I've ever messed with a non-homemade cell holder. This is kind of interesting. This is actually very similar to the one I 3D printed. Although I kind of like the one I 3D printed more just because it's special. It's mine. I don't think I'm going to be buying these anytime soon because I kind of have it down to what I like already. But yeah, that's... Wow, look at that. That's kind of neat. And so this is already designed to allow you to use tabs, like these little nickel tabs, across the cells. That's kind of cool. On to page 5. Making the electrical connections. So there are 2 methods I know of for making the electrical connections to the cells. First is simply soldering the cells. Be careful not to let the cell get too hot when soldering it. It is best to use a large soldering iron in order to have plenty of thermal capacity in the tip. I use a very large 300-watt soldering iron from the 1950s for my cells. And here it is. This is one that I found works really well because there's just a lot of thermal capacity. So as soon as you touch that cell with it, all the heat goes into there, and so there's no shortage of heat. The other option is to spot weld the connections onto the cells. Spot welding is the method that all manufacturers use, but it can be harder to do at home. If you try spot welding, use a large capacitor for your power source, not a battery. Using a battery as a source for spot welding is tedious and unreliable, with a tendency to damage the cell. Just go watch Arduino vs. Evil's videos, because he tried to use a battery pack and it just totally failed because he kept melting the cells and whatnot. I've experimented a little bit with using large capacitors for a discharge tack welder, spot welder, whatever the word is, but I haven't had very much luck with it. Plus, I've never damaged a cell with soldering, so I think I might just keep doing that for a little bit. It's working for my own home projects, at least. One practice I have recently started doing is adding a 4-amp picofuse to each 18650 cell. Here they are, speak of the devil. So you can just get these off of eBay. But I highly recommend putting a 4-amp picofuse on each cell these days, because I've had a few incidents with battery packs almost blowing up on me, causing a lot of issues and shorting out. When a cell fails, it is likely to short out. I once had a cell short out in my e-bike battery and could have caught my bike on fire. The cell started releasing its own stored energy as heat, about 5 watt-hours, but it was connected to 11 other cells in parallel, causing all those cells to feed more power into the shorted cell. The 11 good cells must have supplied something like 50 amps of current to the cell because this thick connecting wire I used had completely melted away. The shorted cell melted but did not catch fire due to that. If those connectors hadn't melted, my bike would have been burned on the side of the road. After this cell failure, I realized I couldn't trust the connectors to melt whenever a cell failed, so I started putting a small fuse in series with each 18650 cell. I feel this is far safer and more reliable than my previous battery packs. I strongly urge anybody making a battery pack to put a fuse in each cell. And here's an example of what happens if a cell does go bad. Although this happened... This was Panasonic cells in this gyro board, and I actually had to get my stepbrother to shoot it like 6 times with a shotgun before the battery blew up. So it's not too bad. Like, they are pretty rugged. I even tried charging those cells to like 8 volts a cell, and it still didn't do anything. Plus, I think some of these cells, especially the higher quality ones, are actually tested to take 12 volts across them without blowing up. Venting, but not blowing up. But I don't know, there's too much fire we're playing with here, so still be careful. Here are some pictures of when I blew up a gyro board, hoverboard, and the cells shot around like fireworks. When the cells deflagrate, they shoot sparks in molten metal, and their contents escape at great speed. The source for this guide's information is mostly based off my own experiments and experience over the past 5 years. Almost all of it is documented on my main YouTube channel, Renoa Super Genius, if you want a closer look. That's just kind of a shout out, because why not add a shout out in an article I'm writing for a zine, you know, why not? So the Tinker's Guide to the 18650 actually started out as a book idea back in like 2013 or 2014. And so I've actually been working on it for a while. I just kind of cut it down for Arduino vs. Evil's zine. But I would like to still sell it someday, or not, maybe I'll sell it, release it as a little pocket guide that you could buy or print out yourself. And I think it'd be kind of neat to have a neat little pocket guide. Like, I recently got this Bolex, and in the little compartment came a little book from 1946 about film ratings in like stuff about films. And I think it'd be really neat to have a little version of the 18650 guide in a book this size and maybe with more information. So I might try to do that someday and maybe sell it for like $3 or something like that, and also print it myself because I wanted to get into having a printing press, maybe a Heidelberg windmill or something like that. I don't know. But yeah, I'm thinking that might be a nice form factor for that type of book. It would probably be a lot more pages, but like even this is 15 pages long, and I could probably fit a good deal of stuff onto here. So during the actual production of this, I used my old worn out 1955 Royal HH typewriter, and I say it's worn out because every so often it'll double type a letter, or it'll skip, or it'll just totally kind of smear stuff, and so it has some mechanical issues. So whenever I type, every so often it'll just be all over the place. So this is actually all the paper that went into making this article. I have a lot of, actually that's not really related, that's just a diagram of a battery size. But I have whole things where basically I just typed a bunch of random stuff and then I scanned it, and I guess the term would be composited in GIMP, and aligned it to where it all looked nice. I have a few diagrams I was trying to work on, but I didn't know for sure what diagrams to do, what diagrams I could do, because I'm not a diagram drawer. And what I decided was I wanted to have at least one diagram per page. I think that's a good number to keep, I think, because for every page you want there to be something to look at instead of just a wall of text. And I'm particularly happy with this flowchart. It's really cool. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Tinker's Guide to the 18650 version 1.2. But 1.3 is not that different, and 1.4 will have the QR code of this video. Mostly just me rambling about 18650s. I hope to someday, whenever I have a more, like when I have this to version 2 or something like that, then I might do like a really nice video, like just about it. Because this is kind of like, this is like a random bits almost, but yeah, I'm thinking something in the future. I'll probably try to do a really nice video where I'll have nice shots for every single scene and whatnot, and I might even like rewrite it just for that. Not really a review of the article, but just a really well done video guide. I don't know, but I think I still have a lot more to learn, because there are a few things, like for instance, I have heard that if you charge a cell to 4.2 volts, you get so many charge-discharge cycles before it reaches 80% capacity. But then if you go down 0.1 of a volt lower, like if you stop charging and add 4.1 volts all the time, then you actually double how long it'll last. If you go to 4.0 volts, you'll then double over that. So you get 4 times the range until you hit 3.9 volts, where you'll get, I think, like 8 times the range, right? 8 times the lifespan, because I read the reasoning behind that being that I think it was something to do with whenever the plates are energized, whenever there's that much energy potential between the plates, that can cause issues to where maybe like lithium ions coat the other plate or something. I'm not sure. I have to dig that up, and I'm gonna also have to test, maybe do a long-term test where I have cells like this one. I charge at 4.2 volts and I discharge it, and I do it thousands of times with a little mechanism. Then I have another one, identical cell from the same pack, that I do to 4.1 cells. I have 4.1 volts, and the other one to 4.0 volts, and we'll see if the lower voltage ones last longer. I'm thinking they might though, because like for instance my electric bicycle battery pack, I got a bad BMS with it, and so it only charges the cells to 3.98 volts. But the cells have lasted a long time, and they were already like 10 years old, used out of a laptop battery, used out of a bunch of laptop battery packs by the time I got them and turned them into my bike battery. So I'm thinking that lower voltage might have a big effect, like just not pushing them as far, not fully charging them. Plus you see that in things like, I think it's like the Tesla Model S. I think I saw that you actually have a slider where you can slide it to actually fully charge it if you're going on a long distance journey. But if you're not going that far, then just don't charge it all the way. It'll charge like 75% or something like that. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Just a little rambling and kind of talking about the little article that I made. I'm currently not sure like anything about our AVE's zine, but I really can't wait to get a copy, and you guys should probably go check out his channel, because the thing is, I'm going to upload this early and then probably release this whenever he starts, like he announces his zine. That way I can have this unlisted and have the link inside the article and have it all ready to go. But right now, as of filming it, I don't actually know anything about it, so I'm kind of anticipating. So maybe go check that out. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you very much for watching. See ya.